This is a conversation with Gian Galang. He's an artist and illustrator, popularly known for his work with the UFC, Reebok, ESPN, and Fightline with Vice. In this conversation, we discuss Bruce Lee and his philosophies, Gian's inspirations from Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Jackie Chan. We dive deep into his work and the different styles and tools and techniques that he uses. And we also discuss creativity. This is No Time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, or rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. I will always believe in the power of this project, but it takes as much time and effort as a second job. So if you'd like to see it continue, do consider making a donation on Patreon, Anchor, Instagram, pick your poison. If not through monetary channels, then do consider sharing these episodes, liking and commenting. All your engagement, it really goes a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, number one, brother, it is no time. Bruce Lee once famously said, "Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend." You are someone who has carved the path in being unconventional. Whether it is marrying two distinct passions in art, illustration, painting with martial arts, or even on the finer details with the type of unconventional tools you use, whether it is knives or aluminum foil or random stuff that you get from Home Depot. My first question for you is, if at this moment you pause and look back on your entire career and your entire life, do you get the feeling that you have espoused Bruce Lee's philosophy in your life as well? Have you adapted different forms? Have you been flexible with different styles? Or in Bruce Lee's vocabulary, have you flowed when it was time to flow? Have you crashed when it was time to crash? Have you been like water, my friend?
That's a big question. I think as an artist, you kind of do have to be like water because I think maybe one of the biggest hurdles that artists face is what they're going to do in their career, because there are so many different paths you can take. I would say more than most professions, there's no real concrete path to follow. So I would say as an artist in my career, I've had to be like water. You kind of take the types of jobs that allow you to express the artwork that you want to make and be able to make a living. It's not like you could just start pumping out artwork and just automatically get paid for it. You kind of have to find the ways that, the different avenues and ecosystems that you can create work and make a living. So yeah, I would say that's a little bit like being like water, finding your level.
No, I completely agree. And even just looking at the evolution that you've gone through in the last 4 or 5 years, starting from Fightline itself, I think you've definitely been like water. I want to stick with the theme of exploring your inspirations, and I have a little game segment for you.
Okay.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to list down inspirations that you've mentioned in previous interviews. And in 90 seconds or less, I would like you to highlight one specific idea, concept, or theory or lesson that you gained from each inspiration. You can also cite specific examples of work that you've done and how that shows that lesson that you have gained or the inspiration that you've gained. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
First one, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay. A lesson that I've learned from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I would say maybe not a lesson, but maybe just an overall inspiration for life. Just have fun, train hard, and kick ass.
Yeah.
Eat pizza.
Yeah. Have fun, train hard, kick ass, eat pizza. These are amazing lessons to get in life. Second one, Jackie Chan.
Oh, Jackie Chan. Almost the same thing. I would say. Have fun, train hard, kick ass.
No pizza though.
But probably a lot less pizza. Do more push-ups. Handstand push-ups.
Handstand push-ups from Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
Third one, Street Fighter.
Oh, dude, Street Fighter. I feel like Street Fighter is maybe one of the biggest inspirations behind my art, because as a kid, I would love to copy the character designs and their individual attributes that they would have in the instruction manuals. And I feel like as a fine artist, I like capturing the energy of figure. And I feel like I learned all that from Street Fighter, because they really did a great job of creating these amazing characters with unique personalities, and marrying their fighting style with how they looked and their appearance and their swagger. So Street Fighter was a huge inspiration for me.
This idea of games inspiring careers and professions, like this is such a new concept, but who would have thought like the creators of Street Fighter would have known that they're creating so much art in the future as well? Definitely something to keep in mind. Fourth one, your professor, George Pratt.
So George Pratt, he really, I think that his biggest lesson for me was the concept of mark making, as opposed to just the traditional idea of drawing and painting. So, you know, when you're in high school or something, you think of drawing as having a pencil or charcoal and eraser, creating lines, or painting, you have paintbrush or paintbrush set, something like that. But George would really stress the idea of creating an emotion with whatever tools you can make. So whether that's watercolor washes or whatever tools that you could use to be the most expressive. So he would do a lot of experimentation. And for me, as someone trying to capture a lot of emotion in my artwork as well, I took George's lessons and tried to select tools and ways of working that allow me to be a little bit more expressive.
So mark making exactly is using any tool to highlight an emotion?
Yeah, or to make a mark on the page, you know?
Okay. Yeah,
you know, like it's not just it's kind of beyond being locked into a line or maybe a certain form. It's kind of you know, you have an idea, you have maybe a form or an expression you're trying to make, and the type of tool that you use can heighten the emotion or expression that you're trying to convey, you know?
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. We will come back to this after this game segment. Yeah. Next one, Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat? So I was more into Street Fighter because my parents wouldn't let me buy Mortal Kombat because it's too bloody.
Yeah, so true,
yeah. So Mortal Kombat, when I think of Mortal Kombat, I think of going to my older cousin's house or my other my friends whose parents didn't care too much about if they had it or not. And it was kind of more like the badass game. So pretty much same influences for me as Street Fighter, but I just played Street Fighter a lot more.
Yeah, thankfully my parents didn't know what Mortal Kombat meant as well.
Yeah,
I used to try and like get through the entire game with every different character to get the backstory at the end of it.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I had a wild, wild childhood. Yeah. Okay, last one for this game, and we began this conversation by naming him. What lessons have you learned from Bruce Lee?
From Bruce Lee. Well, I would like to say at first, I'm not the biggest Bruce Lee head, and I feel like I'm more influenced by the generation after. All the stuff that was influenced by Bruce Lee, like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Ninja Turtles. I'd say the biggest lesson I've learned from Bruce Lee is, I think his biggest lesson, you know, the be water, which I think maybe resonates with so many people because it's the idea of not being unnecessarily locked into a certain type of constraint or certain set of principles where it's to your detriment. I guess from a martial arts point of view, you know, a lot of people consider Bruce the godfather of MMA. And I think, especially from a time when a lot of martial arts were locked into different, very specific clannish groups of thoughts, Bruce was advocating for mixing different techniques based on your physical attributes. So I think that idea of being flexible and not being rigid in your thinking to your detriment is a huge lesson for everybody.
Completely agree. I think Bruce Lee's work in not just martial arts and film, but also philosophy, it's monumental. That is the game segment. Excellent performance. 6 out of 6 from me. You can add that to your resume. It's going to stand out.
Thank you.
Before we tie up this segment about inspirations, one more thing I want to check with you is You worked for 6 years in the advertising world.
Yeah.
You worked as an art director in an advertising agency. What lessons or what skills did you gain from that time that you use in your work now? And do you think that's made you a better artist?
A lot. Is this 90 seconds too, or
No, you can take
okay. Yeah. So yeah, I worked for, I think, actually 7 years in advertising, and one of the reasons I got into advertising was because I studied illustration and graphic design in college, but I didn't have a specific route that I felt I really wanted to go, because when I was in graphic design, I feel like the goal was to work at a really dope graphic design agency, Pentagram, something in New York, or as an illustrator. That path was super unclear, because we had teachers that had done editorial illustration and stuff like that, but they're only teaching at the moment, or their kind of advice at the time was like, oh, make postcards and send them to people and stuff like that. So and I totally get it, because the way that you get out as an illustrator nowadays is always changing. But I was actually attending a lecture by an art director at an advertising agency. It was, at the time, it was Wieden Kennedy Tokyo, and they were doing amazing work across all mediums. Like, they were doing animated music videos. They were doing these really dope layout, like Nike layouts with really cool cutting edge, like graphic design and photography, collage. So I learned a lot working in advertising, because just based on the sheer exposure to so many different creative disciplines. I'd be working, one day I'd be working with a photographer on some kind of layout. I'd be working with different directors on commercials. We'd mix in certain types of graphic design. I think what's great about being in advertising is, I guess, like Bruce Lee, you kind of got to be like water, because you're servicing so many different clients, so many different brands. So it's like the opposite of being an artist now, where I kind of have a very specific way that I work, a look, and the only people that come to me to hire me are they're looking for my work, right? But it's like the opposite in advertising, where whether even two different sports brands, if you're working with Reebok and Nike, they're going to be different. Or I'm working with like all kinds of different clients from different backgrounds. So visually, it kind of opened my mind up to all kinds of creative explorations, different ways of combining type, illustration, photography. So it allowed me to wear many hats and hone in on the different things that I liked.
Yeah. The exposure to so many different styles in the industry, definitely can be very, very useful. Let's dive deep into your work and your process. And I also want to touch upon what you mentioned earlier, which I found very interesting, mark making.
Yeah.
You are someone who uses many different styles and approaches. We just touched upon it as well. In a previous interview, you mentioned, just as an example, that if you want to show speed, you might use a wet substrate. Or if you want to show impact, you focus a lot more on the texture. If it's something abstract, you might focus on expressionism. For fighters in motion, like I and Mike, you often superimpose a lot of limbs to create that effect as well. You also experiment with a lot of different tools. We mentioned you use stuff you get from Home Depot, you use knives, aluminum foil as well. For the aspiring art students that might be watching this, can you provide a short masterclass on 3 or 4 of these styles and approaches I just listed out? Why did you pick that? What was the vision you had in mind? How do you go about executing it, and how does it impact the piece?
Okay. So I think for me, when I'm selecting my tools and ways of working, what I've found is the more that I relinquish control, the more I have to be a little bit more spontaneous.
Spontaneous.
Yeah. Spontaneous.
Yeah.
And I kind of have to react a little more.
Of course.
And I get unexpected results, which can be interesting to me, Also, a big part of my process is, I love rendering. I love draftsmanship. So when I create these happy accidents, wild mark making, and I combine it with certain elements that are rendered very tightly, that juxtaposition can help me emphasize certain things. Like you were saying, speed, movement. When you have something that's really wild, juxtaposed right next to something that's really tight, the focus shifts. What is moving faster? What is, what has more impact? So, basically, I think for me, it's finding the balance of tightness and precision and being able to just let loose. So recently, I've been doing a lot of collage, because for me, collage helps me physically separate the areas where I can be really wild and where I can create a more precise painting, without having to worry about, oh my God, I'm going to mess the face up because I'm about to like splatter paint all the way around. So before I would do a lot of masking, and I still do some masking, but this year I've really been exploring with collaging, where I just create multiple paintings and then I just cut them together. And then I'm like, oh wow, this like really weird wet brush stroke looks really cool, placed right up against the face, or another really rough painting on the other side. So I guess if you were asking to dive into different specific tools, one of the tools I picked up from my professor we mentioned before, George Pratt, was the paint roller. And that's like the ultimate example of relinquishing control, because it's almost like it's like the opposite of a pen, where exactly what it's going to look like when you get to a certain skill level, or you have enough experience. But when you have the roller, there's going to be unexpected textures all the way throughout. So you kind of do have a little bit more high energy. It helps you be a little bit more spontaneous, and for me, I think it really helps focus on the big shapes, because you don't know exactly where it's going to land, but that helps you keep the biggest shapes in mind. What I mean by shapes is the darks and the lights. And for me, those are the building blocks of any composition, because you want to be able to read it, at least in illustration. You want to be able to read the forms as clearly as possible from very far away. And that's in building very strong shapes. So when you have something that's like really unwieldy, like a roller, you just become a little bit more extra focused that you're getting the right shape right away, instead of kind of noodling very tightly with a very fine pen, and you're not really focusing on the big thing. So I think working with something like that helps you focus on the big areas first. As far as maybe something else like collage, like I said, collage helps you, for me, it helps you be a little bit more free, because you're not so worried about experimenting on one piece, where you're, because whereas maybe in the past, before I started doing collage, I was like, I got this far and I spent a lot of time rendering this figure. Do I really want to take a chance and bust out, like a wet roller and stuff and mess everything up? But with collage, you kind of like iterate a little bit more. I can do like 20 paintings and then pick the one that has the coolest splatter, coolest technique, and then cut that out. Put it next to, included in the overall composition. So that's another technique I've been using.
Can I give you a prompt? So
yeah,
for the people who are listening to this on audio, Gian gave me this wonderful print of Iron Mike Tyson. Can you walk us through your process behind creating this? What was the vision you had in mind, and how do you execute it?
Okay, so my process for each illustration is pretty standard for illustration, which is basically what they teach you, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, is you want the shape to read as clearly as possible, as quickly as possible, from far away. This is obviously not always the case. There's some different styles, cartoonists who can just start doodling an eyeball and then it becomes, a whole painting. But I think for the majority of illustrators, it's usually working big to small. So for something like this, I'll start off with a concept, and it's not too deep. I wanted to paint Iron Mike, but I wanted to showcase his violence, how quickly he moves in and out, his bobbing and weaving. So I create multiple thumbnails. How do I express this? The different angles. So I make a lot of small, when I say thumbnails, that means very small sketches about the size of a thumbnail, maybe a little bit bigger in a sketchbook. So I can very quickly throw out the bad ideas. That's the idea of making, because you want to just create all the wrong ideas so you get to arrive to the quickest, so you arrive to the correct one in the quickest fashion before you spend so much time, rendering. So
can I pause you there?
Yeah.
When you say get all the bad ideas out of the way, what is your approach to creativity? Do you get this feeling that you're just channeling a lot of ideas through and then it's just landing on the right one?
Yeah.
Like, do you often feel like the work that you're doing, and I might not be wording this properly, is that you're not creating it on the spot, but rather when you're in the zone, it's just coming through. These ideas are just rushing through, and then it's just a matter of sifting through it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, I think this is something I really learned in advertising too, because in advertising, the number one thing you're looking for, you're mining for, is the right idea. And with that, it's like you got to go through so many crappy ideas, and it's just it's not just going to pop into your head, because you always have you have the time pressure. So the only way to get to the really cool idea is just to like write down every idea that you have, and then that bad idea will maybe lead to a good idea, hopefully, if you have enough of them. So it's kind of like that. It's a little different in drawing, I guess, because sometimes you have a little bit more a better idea of the form, but there's still so many different variations you want to. So yeah, I try to get all those all the different ideas I have out. Then I think it's through iteration is where you can really select the best thing, and basically it's just building on there. So once I get the tight thumbnail that I like, maybe I'll take a picture of it, put it in Photoshop, and maybe I'll block in the big lights and darks. So for me, in my illustration, lights and darks and composition, because I mainly work with figurative work, are very important, because I don't do a lot of maybe backgrounds, or it's not narrative like through like a comic book or something like that. It's like one single image. So I'll work on the biggest shapes, lights and darks. So in this case, in the Iron Mike example, I wanted to emphasize his inside movement. So my idea was to have one set of legs and have 3 different torsos kind of going wild. So when I got to this stage, I basically took some references so I could design the shadows and lights in a way that the form would be legible, because you could see it 3 torsos on top of one legs. You could see it becoming very muddy very quickly, like not being able to understand, oh, is this his arm, is this the back arm or whatever. So I shoot photo references to very quickly help me decide and design where the light is going to be, so the forms can be the most legible. So after I do that, I have my reference board. I have my reference photos of Mike Tyson all set up. I have my really tight sketch. That's when I get into my favorite part of painting, which is, I guess people would call it the flow state, because I have almost like all the problems figured out. I have all the things that are really going to stop me and be like, wait, how am I going to do this? It's all figured out. I know I have reference photos. I know, what the forms are going to look like. And now that's when I turn on an audiobook, a podcast, and I can focus on the art making, which is texture, form, how the different paint is going to affect the paper. Like the really like minute things that maybe are less important than the overall form, but for me it's the most fun, because it's the stuff that you do as a kid, where you're like really, oh, I really want to focus on the shading on this face, things like that, all the detailing.
At that stage, are you really concentrating on it, or are you playing? Like, because you put
More
on
playing.
You're more playing because you put on a podcast, you put on an audiobook, so you got your attention somewhere. So it feels like you're just now allowing your ideas to just flow through.
Yeah, because I don't have to come up with any ideas anymore, because it's all like laid out for me. I've already solved all the big problems of legibility, shape, in the sketch, and I have the references. So basically, I'm using the other side of the brain where you're just like, I'm taking this part, I'm gonna paint it like that. I'm like translating through my hands basically, and that's the most enjoyable. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do. Like, especially listening to a dope sci-fi or a fantasy audiobook. It's like I'm watching a movie and I'm painting at the same time. So it's awesome. It's that's my favorite thing to do.
Oh, sounds fun. I know. Thank you so much for that insight. I think it was a great masterclass into how you create these pieces. It was very, very, very insightful. Follow-up question while you were talking about Iron Mike Tyson. You created a poster for UFC 281, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Can you walk us through your process behind creating that poster as well?
Okay, so my process behind creating that poster was what I had spoken a little bit about recently, was collage. So this whole year for me has been experimenting with collage. I mean, that's my new sandbox right there.
Year of the collage.
Yeah. So same way, I start off multiple thumbnails. For this one, because of the history of the fight, of the matchup, Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira, they had been foes in outside of MMA, in kickboxing.
Kickboxing, yeah.
And after they battled in kickboxing, Izzy went to the UFC, became a superstar, became the champion of the UFC, and Alex followed. So in my head, I had the narrative of a hero villain. So that was the main kind of compositional choice. Have Izzy in the front, kind of as the hero, and Alex looming in the background, kind of like Darth Vader, something like that.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty simple. That's the main concept, if you call that a concept. And then for me, it's just designing a form that I felt was dynamic. It chose Izzy's most famous pose, Bring It On from one of his favorite anime. And is basically experimenting with different textures and colors, and ways of lighting it so it feels dynamic and popping forward. So for this one, because I was making a big painting, the layers had to be more calculated, because I was cutting it out of thicker thing. I wasn't just painting on paper. So the main forms are hand cut with a jigsaw out of masonite. So I had to, which is just brown board from Home Depot. So for this, my sketch had to be a little bit tighter because, before I did the painting, I had to cut the figure out. So there's no kind of like, oh, let's make the head smaller later or something like that. So this one was a little bit more planning, but not something I'm not used to. When I do commercial jobs, something like a mural for Nike, you often your sketches have to be like 99% there. So, I'm used to that.
How long did it take you, the poster?
So the poster took maybe like 2 weeks, including the sketching and stuff like that. Yeah, because so for this one, because I had to do a lot of building. So for the poster, I ended up doing a 5-foot painting because when they told me, when the UFC told me that it was going to be Israel Adesanya, who is my Instagram friend, and I would say maybe real life friend, maybe. I'm not his friend, but we did meet and said what's up.
He's watching.
Right. And I knew that it was going to be in New York. I was like, oh, that would be cool to do a physical painting and have them see it in person. So that was amazing that we got that to work out. So I wanted to make the physical painting. So, like I said, there was a lot of construction involved. I had to build the frame so I could fit the pieces in like a puzzle. But in some ways that's a lot more satisfying when you have something that big and you have to be precise. And then all the wild paintings that you do, when they fit together like a puzzle, it's like so satisfying.
Can imagine.
Yeah, because like when you're making all these weird paintings, like I did a lot of abstract paint pours for the backgrounds. You don't know what it's going to look like because you're just making splatters and stuff. And then, I take pictures of them, bring it into Photoshop, and select the areas that I want to include in the composition. Then I hand cut them. And then when they all fit together precise at the end, you're like,
Yes.
it feels so good. Yeah.
Oh, so you made 3, 4 paintings, and then you cut out depending on what you. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I made for the abstract pours, I did like maybe 20 because because you just don't know what you're gonna get,
course,
and then you kind of design it. Some of the pores look like energy radiation. Some look like speed lines, and you kind of want to have a balance between where the figure's action is moving towards. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
No, definitely
for me. Yeah,
and that was amazing. I really enjoyed that because I've seen that poster. It's incredible. And now to hear the story behind it, it all makes sense, right? The hero's in the front. He's calling him on. At the back, he's looming Alex Pereira. He got the villain. He got the reddish tone to him.
Yeah.
It all makes sense. Perfect. You mentioned meeting Izzy, who's now your friend. What was it like meeting Stylebender?
Dude, he's amazing. He's a real star. I would say he's a real star. He's like the opposite of me. He's like so charismatic. He knows exactly what to say. Like totally cool in real life, just like you would think. Just a really cool dude. I met him just briefly. We talked a little bit about the painting. But it was fight week, so it's not like I could just hang out with Stylebender all day. He's got ESPN interviews, everything. So,
but he has a signed poster from you now.
We shipped the painting to his house. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go.
New Zealand, yeah.
Do you think he beats Alex Pereira in the rematch?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a mysterious yes.
No, you can't have any predictions in MMA. But
why do you think he beats Alex?
No, I feel like especially in the early kickboxing days of Izzy, it's very apparent that his brain is at another level, almost like the reflexes. So I always feel like if he can operate mentally at like a higher level than other guys, then he can adapt whatever physically, because his physical attributes are awesome, but it seems like Alex is a lot bigger, right? But I think that maybe his mental game can adapt what he's going to do physically, and he'll be able to overcome it. And he was winning. He was winning in all the fights, dude. He was winning all the fights. So,
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match. Reminded me very much of Kamaru Leon as well. The dominant champion was dominating, and then there was just like last round. Some momentum.
Yeah.
Okay. I took the digression. I apologize. Let's bring it back to art. We were talking about your process as well. Do you ever get the feeling that you leave a piece of you behind in every project you work on? Can you now look on projects you worked on a couple of years ago and immediately tell like the mood you were in at that point and how that infused the piece that you're working on?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I leave a piece of me behind, but what's weird? I look at a lot of paintings and I can remember the podcast I was listening to at the time, or like the audiobook I was listening to at the time, because it's just like so mixed in. I would say the pieces where I have the most memories from are murals, because I feel like out of all my paintings, murals are the most high pressure, because it's usually a time constraint. You have to be working. I'm working at the biggest scale, than everything's a little bit harder. I always say murals for me is like working out, because when you change a color, you go down from the lift, you pour out a color, you got to change out your brush, and then when you come back to the studio, everything's like right there, and it's like you're like painting muscles are totally jacked, and you know how to do everything quicker. So and also what I get from doing murals is you're kind of embedded in the environment for me, like a couple of days to a week, and you just, I think the whole environment bleeds into the artwork. Like when I was in Chinatown on the street in New York City painting a mural on Doyer Street, you know, while I'm painting all day, you see people going to the post office, stopping, looking, you know, going to eat dim sum, and you're talking to you, you know, all day. And it's like almost like you become part of the community, part of the wall for like a week. And you have, you know, and I feel like I have a lot of fun memories from doing murals.
Yeah, part of the wall. And interesting that you remember the audiobook of the podcast. Audio has such a strong connection to memory and smell as well. It's very interesting. In a previous interview, you mentioned that personally you feel one of the drawbacks that you have for yourself is that you sometimes get lost in the finer details, and not being able to step out and seeing the bigger picture can be a flaw. Salvador Dali had once said that have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it.
Yeah.
As an artist, how hard is it to draw that line for perfection? When do you know it's time to stop? Because any more time that you spend on perfecting this small amount will just be, it's an endless journey. It's going to be unproductive.
Yeah. That point is when I can't stand it anymore, basically. Because so I always have what me and my wife call the agonies phase, which is it's like the last 3 or 4 days of the painting where in her eyes it doesn't change at all. She's like, it looks exactly the same. But for me, I'm trying to just like iterate on all the little things, and especially you know, one of the you know, I think having Photoshop is definitely a blessing and a curse in that, you know, I'll take a picture of my painting, I'll go to Photoshop, I'll change a little bit of this. I'm like, is this a good change? And I'll flip it back. I'll go to, you know, go to a different area, change the color, whatever. And because of Photoshop, I'm able to preview a lot of changes before I physically make it, before I physically commit. But also because of Photoshop, I'm just endlessly noodling. I'm like, well, what if I do this? You know, this looks cool, but what if I, you know, created this stroke? What if I did this? So basically, there's a point where in that agony phase where I'm just like, God, I can't be working on this freaking face anymore. And then I put it away. Then the next morning, if I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, then it's good to go. So, and a lot of times it's just the deadline. It's like we need the 281 poster now because we need to get it printed. So
yeah, no, definitely a very tough decision, not just for people in art in the creative field, but also just perfection and trying to accomplish a task without like getting lost and trying to make every single part of it perfect is always a challenge.
And you know what? I think that is another thing that I learned from advertising, because advertising is always last minute. It's always, you know, it's never where a client comes up with an idea, oh, let's get an artist and have them do a painting for 3 months and then put it out. It's always like, our campaign is going out now. We need the painting yesterday. And that's really where art and commerce hits, you know, art hits the road with commerce. So
all those deadlines in advertising, look, there are benefits to it. Anyone who's advertising who's listening or watching to this, a lot of benefits. Let's start moving into our final questions. Which is the greatest comic book of all time and why?
Oh, dude, well, I can't say that. But my favorite, I would say my favorite comic book is Fables. You know, as a kid, I had a lot of favorite comic books, and it was mostly the popular stuff. I think as a kid, the most memorable comic book series was, you know, the McFarlane Spider-Man Venom saga, Maximum Carnage, Nightfall, Batman Nightfall, where he gets his back broken. But when I got back into comics a little bit as an adult, Fables just had my favorite story. And I don't think I think it's probably the only series where I've read over 150 issues, you know, straight, and multiple times even. Also helped that it had the cover artwork by one of my favorite artists, James Jean. And Bone is the other one that has the awesome story. You know, like I think when I was a kid, comic books were all about who the artist was, at least in the 90s when I grew up. But I think as an adult, the story is the number one thing for me. And I think Fables Fables is my favorite story.
Fables takes the crown.
Yeah.
Which is the greatest martial art form of all time?
Martial art, dude. Well, that's a trick question because I'm an MMA fan, which is a mix of the martial arts. But as a favorite martial art to practice myself, Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
Because I feel like coming up with Ninja Turtles and Street Fighter, striking is the coolest. You want to be able to have the ninja moves, the ninja kicks. I have respect for all the martial arts, the ground grappling, but you want to be able to do, the cool kicks. And I feel like it's the most fun workout for me. Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought of this follow-up question. So martial arts is an art. Nobody debates that. But can you make the argument that art is a form of fighting? Where does it ever feel like when you're in front of a piece, do you feel like you're going to war or going into combat with the piece, maybe yourself, maybe with the instruments in front of you?
I would say going to war with yourself.
With yourself.
Yeah, because because you're struggling with, I wouldn't call it a fight.
Okay.
It's not like being, I don't think it's like being in a fight, but maybe in the smallest sense, in that I think I'm struggling, I think as an artist, you're struggling with a lot of things. You're struggling with your own style, and what I guess might be expected of you, especially if you're doing a commercial gig.
What are you comfortable with? Maybe?
Yeah, maybe you're straddling the line between what you're comfortable and maybe expressing what people know you for and what what's gonna get likes on Instagram, maybe something like that, versus what maybe you're naturally curious about. You're like, oh, well, I want to try this, but I don't know if should I take the risk on this job because because of the deadline and everything. So I would say it's an internal struggle. Also, there's also being an artist is always for me the internal struggle of, can I do this forever? Is this gonna, it almost seems fake that I can just draw and paint and this is how I make my living. So I'm always worried that it's gonna run out at some point. So that's like a mental struggle.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, people talk about chasing your dreams, but there's always this constant cloud that this is too good to be true. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like you've converted your childhood passion of sketching comic book characters into a profession. You're great at it. But is this going to be the last? I completely get it. That can always be a struggle. So you brought up something. So another follow-up question for you. You spoke about how creating art for people and with the purpose of it being viewed by millions of people and being consumed by people changes the art, versus experimental art that you're just creating for yourself in your own studio. How is that different? Do you feel like two different artists work on that? Do you think two different Gians work on those type of art? One that's being created to be consumed and one that's for yourself?
So I don't think it's too different, but I think if I work on one for too long, I lose interest and get bored a little bit. Especially when I was working, when I was starting out, everything was MMA related because first I was doing editorial stuff. So I was even though it's my passion, I'm like, I do kind of want to paint some other things. But then I think that's where maybe stepping into the fine art world has helped a little bit, doing comic book covers and stuff like that has helped a little bit, where I get to explore those areas. But then when I get hit with another UFC job, I'm like refreshed. I'm like, oh yeah, let me get on this again. I think there definitely is a little bit of balance, especially on Instagram. If I post a couple, too many images in a row of non-MMA guys, the numbers start to slide.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, I took some digressions back to it. Who is the greatest martial artist? And I emphasize the word artist because for this question, I don't want you to focus on impact or wins or defenses, but rather the person who showcased martial arts as an art form in its purest form.
Oh, well, that's got to be Bruce Lee. Because, he is an artist. He made it the most popular. I think he made martial arts the most popular it had ever been, simply through his artistry, screen presence, and the whole package, the philosophy, everything.
Bruce Lee takes the crown. Who is the greatest UFC fighter of all time?
The greatest?
Yeah.
Dude. You're going to get me in trouble.
Yeah,
no, I'm not. So I don't think I can say greatest because you can't. That's a pound for pound thing. I would say my favorite current active fighter is my boy Izzy. But I think my two favorites, it's hard, 1 and 2, Mark Hunt, because Super Samoan, because for me, he's like the ultimate underdog and the ultimate fighter that speaks with his fists. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if nobody's familiar with Mark Hunt. He is this super, at least height-wise, undersized heavyweight. Yeah. He was like 5'11" or 5'10", something like that. But he would just fight these monsters in Japan. And before he went to the UFC, he was on, I don't know, like a massive losing streak. But so he was like a super underdog. And at some points people would say he looked overweight. So he looked visually like a guy that shouldn't be in there with kind of these really big, tall
Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar guys. Yeah, totally. So, but then he would just kill these dudes. He's the ultimate KO king. Like, I feel like even today, I know that maybe there were some other heavyweights that have more knockouts, maybe, but
Derek Lewis, I think now.
Maybe, yeah. But still, I feel like it's not like Mark Hunt. So, and I just love that, he just wouldn't talk any shit. He would just do it. So he was almost my favorite. And then the other was Machida, just because I was a karate kid. He was the first guy that came on with just a predominantly karate style, and he became a champion. So I was just a huge fan of Machida too.
Machida. So you named your favorites. Greatest in history, not current, so you don't get into trouble.
I don't know. Greatest fighter in history?
UFC history, yeah.
UFC?
Yeah.
Oh man. I feel like maybe Bones.
Bones.
Yeah, just because Bones, Anderson. Bones maybe. Just because maybe the feeling of how dangerous he was, Like there's obviously the greats, GSP, multiple weight champion, and same with Anderson, so dominant. But I feel like Bones is so scary, and especially the popularity and caliber of guys he was going through, and just dispatching them. He seemed like very unbeatable. So
yeah, you can't make a case against Johnny Bones, and if he wins the heavyweight championship, he's cemented. He's already there. Like the conversation's happening. But if he wins the heavyweight against Francis Ngannou, it's gonna be crazy. So you pick Johnny Bones. GSP is not impressed by your performance. Yeah. But we'll move past it. Before we go into our last 3 questions, I would love for you to interpret what do you think I have built.
So I didn't build anything.
What do you think these masterpieces are?
Let me see. I feel like this looks like a camera.
Oh,
maybe this is the camera and this is me and this is you. I think you've got the screen, you've got this is your mic, and this is me just chilling. So I think
I have recreated this experience. The set itself, the camera, and you're chilling.
Yeah. You made a meta Lego set. So
yeah, there we go.
Cool.
Just asking questions, just chilling. All questions easy. Let's go into our last 3 questions. What are some books, movies, role models, apart from the inspiration we just discussed, that have been positive influences in your life?
Books, movies. Okay, well.
We can add podcasts and audiobooks.
Yeah, let me, I guess, maybe for the inspirational learning things, I listen to podcasts, lots of different podcasts. I say I definitely have favorite fiction books. And so my favorite science fiction book, Ready Player One, and favorite series, Old Man's War by John Scalzi. It's an amazing series. And my favorite fantasy audio or book, for me it's an audiobook, is The First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And for anybody who doesn't know that, I think it's better than Game of Thrones, but because I think the characters, it dives right into the character development, and it's just more badass and fun and engaging. It's a lot more fast paced, but it has that deep world and depth of characters as Game of Thrones, but I think it's just a lot more badass and fun. As far as who else? What else? Movies
or role models.
Okay. Probably got a lot of hate. My favorite movie is The Last Samurai.
Yeah, why not?
That series. I haven't even watched the classic samurai movies just because I always try to get to them and I'm like, man, this is too old. I don't know if I'm gonna like this. But for me, The Last Samurai is the only movie I've ever watched 3 times in the movie theaters, and because it came out at a time when I was a teenager, when I was in high school. I was into karate. I was into Japanese culture, the craftsmanship, and when Tom Cruise discovers the samurai in Japan, I felt like I was discovering Japan, like through his eyes. And I shortly went to Tokyo later, so that I love that movie.
Would you rank that above your other favorites, Rush Hour and Kill Bill?
Oh.
Yeah, tough.
Yeah,
questions.
no, yeah,
Oh,
Last Samurai, yeah.
Tom
yeah.
Cruise wins it out.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you like your legacy to be like?
My legacy. I don't think I've ever thought about legacy, but I think my focus in my artwork is just leveling up to be the best version that I can. I think, one thing that I try to do with my little brother is I'm always trying to get back into video games, because we used to play a lot of video games as a kid. But I think the reason why I can't get into video games is because my art career is my video game. I'm like constantly trying to get to the next level. I'm trying to get this project, complete this objective. So I think, if I was going for a legacy, it's just creating the coolest work that I can make. Yeah, just being the best version of myself.
Yeah, very interesting. I do think that year on year, I think you do level up. Last question for you. We spoke about art, about expressing yourself, about the internal battle. We spoke about your process, about flow states, about reaching that moment, of reaching that zone. Final question. What is the meaning of this all? What do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, man, dude. Well, I've definitely never thought of what is the meaning of life. But I think it just goes back to maybe the last question. Me and my wife's favorite show is Shark Tank. And I think the reason why I love Shark Tank is because you're watching people going for it. Like they're going for their ultimate, whatever their ultimate goal is. And I think I just love that in everybody. I love it. My brother just recently moved to New York, and he works at a New Yorker, and he's just living the New York lifestyle. He's like, he does rock climbing. He's doing stand-up. He's like really going for, I feel like, what is going to be the ultimate version of himself. So I think if you had to ask me what is the meaning of life, I'd say going for everything you want and becoming the best version of yourself.
Going for everything you want, becoming the best version of yourself. I love it. Gian, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, find out about your next work, where can they do so?
You just Google my name, Gian Galang, and I have a website, Gian Galang. My Instagram is Gian Galang. So
perfect. I recommend checking Gian out. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Hey, thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me.